Story 1. This happened to me in spring 2017. In 2016, I was unhappy at my current position with not very many hours and too much drama, so I started looking for a new job. Got a few offers, nothing that I'd take, as the one I had allowed me to have weekends off so I could work my second job. I eventually landed an interview with a brand new construction company, so I sat down, and who walked out? An acquaintance I work with on the weekends. We start chatting about this and that. It's at a ski resort, so it was mostly about skiing, which tends to be very enthusiastic. So needless to say, I'm offered the job on the spot, as I have a real work reference right there. I took the job as it was exactly what I was looking for, with a work vehicle as a perk, an expense account. Turns out that was me just spending my own money and getting reimbursed. One of many shady practices and red flags. Edit: this was supposed to be a company credit card, not a reimbursement account. Being American, I needed some health care. I ended up having to borrow money for a medical procedure. At the time, not realizing he offered this money on purpose, so I couldn't leave. Or I could leave and actually owe him money, which I would have owed him a lot, so I'm stuck. About a year goes by, and I see one tradesman after another get hired on then fired. He was a repeating pattern, so I knew my time was limited if I paid him back. I also knew I'd have to have a tough time getting paid, even if the amount earned was more than what I owed. So I began looking for another job. Found one easily enough. More perks, a way more reputable company. I knew I had timed this just right, so I planned my exit with only 3 days worked on the pay period. So when I received my direct deposit, I had only worked and was owed for 3 days. I could easily live with losing that money. So I go to the secretary and pay off my draw. Get a receipt and my balance is 0. Double check with the boss that we are square. Yes, he texts back, "Thank you for paying me back early. Lol, thanks for the evidence." Boom, it all goes down in a second. I returned everything. Owner threatens to call the cops. Says I owe him way more, and I did. Claims I broke everything in my vehicle. One of the beautiful things about a boss that is never on site is that most everything is done by email or text. I send him screenshots of everything, including a picture of my Zelle balance owed. Text back, "I'll get my last check in the mail. Thanks for more evidence." 2 months go by. I called twice after a few weeks. Got hung up on. Laced on hold, then hung up on. "Oh, you want to hang up on me, huh? Let's see how the Department of Labor feels about it." File a wage claim with the Department of Labor. Lady straight up tells me there's not much she can do because all the boss has to do is dispute it. And then it will go to a hearing and be dragged out, possibly for years, over a few $100s. Email her everything. She compliments me on my thorough documentation and says I might have a case. She then tries to contact my former employer. Gets hung up on. Gets placed on hold. Then she got yelled at by the boss's girlfriend, who happened to be there filling in for one of the bosses was in Mexico. There is no way we owe that guy money. He was a real piece of work, and he owes us money, and I want to speak to your supervisor. No hearing was needed. Here is your check. Please come by the Department of Labor to pick it up. So I went to pick up my check. She then hands me a form and says that if I'm satisfied, then I should check that box, but if I'd like a more thorough investigation, if one is warranted, then I should check the other box, and she strongly suggested that I check that box, so I did. 1 week later, I received another identical paycheck, which I had to go pick up. In the meantime, my friend who worked in the office started documenting everything from her side, and had a similar experience when she quit. That's a shocker. Story 2. About 20 years ago, I attended a small Christian university. It was a legitimate institution with proper accreditation and provided a good education. Honestly, the professors and staff were excellent overall. However, the students were a different story. The university seemed to attract its fair share of entitled individuals. During my first year, I didn't make many friends. Being an introvert and painfully shy, I found it challenging to put myself out there. As a result, I ended up with a random roommate for my second year. Let's call him Jake. Jake turned out to be a bully. Looking back, I feel like I might have carried an invisible sign that said, "Target me." This seemed to be the story of my childhood and early adult life. Jake would take my belongings without asking, criticize my choices, and mock my field of study. Jake also had a friend, Mark, who might have been even worse. Mark exhibited all the worst traits of a self-righteous religious zealot. He was arrogant, hypocritical, and overly ambitious, aspiring to become a pastor. Both of them constantly bullied me. They claimed they wouldn't do it if I stood up for myself. But when I finally did, I realized they couldn't handle being confronted. They frequently interrupted my studies and sleep, making my life miserable. It got so bad that I started contemplating very dark thoughts for the first time in my life. To cope, I spent as much time as I could away from my dorm. I could share numerous stories about them, but I'll focus on one incident involving each of them. Mark had a habit of playing video games with us, mostly Super Smash Bros. He was overly confident and undeniably a better player than me. I preferred single-player experiences and wasn't as competitive. Trash talk was common during these sessions, but Mark and Jake couldn't handle being on the receiving end. One time, during a group game, I somehow managed to win. Feeling good about my rare victory, I was caught off guard when Mark chimed in. Mark said, "I lost to you? I must have been playing terribly." Feeling annoyed, I responded, "Maybe it's because God wanted to see you humbled." Yes, I admit my comebacks weren't the sharpest back then. Mark retorted, "Well, he's going to enjoy it when you get punched in the face." One of the other players immediately reacted with a shocked, "Whoa." Mark had just essentially threatened violence over a video game. I decided to call out his hypocrisy. "You get upset with us for swearing," I said, "but you just suggested I deserve to be punched." Mark launched into a lecture about how swearing was against his faith. Before he could get too far, another player interrupted him, saying, "Mark, just stop talking." I couldn't help but laugh. Mark was left speechless, and although he later gave that player a lecture about swearing, the guy said it was worth it. Mark's entitled behavior wasn't limited to gaming sessions. He once shamed a friend of mine for being physically affectionate with her boyfriend, entered people's rooms without permission to use their belongings, and refused to pay back borrowed money on multiple occasions. Jake, on the other hand, was less openly religious at the time, but equally problematic. This story comes secondhand, but I trust the sources. One weekend, while I was home, Jake decided to go out drinking. At our religious university, drinking was strictly prohibited, and Jake had already been in trouble for it before. He thought the rule was ridiculous and had no intention of following it. To make matters worse, he was underage at the time. That evening, Jake stumbled into the common area completely intoxicated. Two of my friends were watching a movie when he sat down and threw his keys on the table. Soon after, he began vomiting, and they called the resident assistant on duty. This particular resident assistant was one of the kindest people on campus, always willing to help and support others. When he arrived and saw Jake, he asked if Jake needed anything: water, assistance, or someone to talk to. Jake, however, wasn't in the mood for help. He angrily told everyone to leave him alone and declared that he was going to drive. When the resident assistant tried to stop him by reaching for his keys, Jake punched him in the face. I didn't hear all the details of what happened after that, but I later received a call informing me that Jake had been expelled and banned from campus. This situation caused some issues for me, as the administration suspected I might have known about Jake's behavior and kept it quiet. I explained that I avoided our dorm room as much as possible, which my friends and the library staff corroborated. Despite this, the incident hurt my chances of becoming a resident assistant myself, as the administration remained unsure about my involvement. Fortunately, things improved after that year. Mark had to leave the university because his parents refused to fund his education due to his poor grades. He never went on to become a pastor, which was a relief to many who knew him. Jake, unfortunately, spiraled into a difficult life. He was homeless for a long time and later became just as self-righteous as Mark had been, though he never achieved any position of influence. After they were gone, I finally began to find my place on campus. I connected with others in my major and met people who genuinely embodied the values of kindness and compassion. Life improved dramatically. After graduating, I worked overseas, deconstructed my faith, sought therapy for my mental health challenges, and built meaningful friendships that continue to enrich my life. This wasn't the last time I encountered entitled individuals, but I've learned how to handle them better now. If you're considering attending a small religious college, I'd recommend weighing your options carefully. Faith itself isn't the issue, but based on my experience, it might be better nurtured in a healthier environment. Story 3. So, that happened today, a few hours ago. Backstory. It's hot here. My dad is some kind of a supervisor at a company that supplies and maintains fire alarms in hotels, restaurants, and so on. Not going to say the name for privacy reasons. In one of the hotels, client of the company, my dad is friends with the owner, so me, my family, and up to 2 friends can come to their pool without being guests at the hotel and without paying a dime. Cast: entitled parent, entitled kid, nice lifeguard, nice bar employee, and the nice owner. Story. As I said, it's hot at this time of the year. Almost all of the daytime, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., is above 30 degrees. I decided to go to that exact pool with my girlfriend and my best friends. So, I called the owner, we are friends also along with my father, and let him know. He said it's not a problem, and we can come anytime we want. We went there about 2 p.m., when it's hottest, but most awesome in the water. Since it's also kind of warm, there weren't many people. The pools are separated in 2. A kid's one, about 90 centimeters to a meter, 35 to 39 inches, and an adult one that goes deeper by the center from 240 to 400 centimeters, 8 to 13 foot. Yeah, it's deep, but cool. So in the adult one, except for the 4 of us, there is only one woman, who leaves about 5 minutes after we get there. We get out things set up on the chairs, and I get to the bar to get soda and snacks. I bring everything to the squad. We all eat some, not all of it. It was sandwiches, and drink some soda, again not all of it. And we then went straight to the pool. Note that we didn't jump in, didn't cause any disturbance or yell at all, just going casually through the edge or the ladder. In the kids' pool, there was only one child. That was with the woman that left, so no one except for us in the pool. We swam for a little, about 5 minutes, when the entitled parent and the entitled kid entered the scene. Conversation. Entitled parent: excuse me, do you mind getting out of the pool? Me, as the most calm human being in the group: what seems to be the problem? We didn't do anything. I wanted to say this as a question and as a communicative sentence. You are taking too much space, and my precious child can't swim. First of all, her precious child is about a 7-year-old boy who can't be in the adult pool. Second, this is a 30 x 50 meters, 98 x 164 feet, long and wide pool, even though there is more than enough space. I explained that to her. Entitled parent: no, I want you to leave now. Entitled kid: come on, just leave. This is our pool, the owner is my father. The child said that. I laughed internally. I know the owner's family. Believe it or not, it's not these people. Me: no. I know the owner, you're not his family. The mother bends down to the pool and throws water at me, like a small child. My hair got wet. I haven't gone underwater yet, and she said the most stupid thing I've ever heard. Entitled parent: haha, you're wet now? Aren't you mad? Then, I began to wonder about the meaning of my existence, as well as the existence of pools in which there is water. Me, my girlfriend and friends, silence. Entitled parent: okay, now, out. No, thanks, I like it here. I will go report you to the lifeguard. She goes there, tells him everything with lies, of course. Note that the lifeguard heard everything firsthand, so he comes to us and whispers, "Don't worry, I'll take care of her. I heard what really happened." She was watching from a distance thinking she had won. The lifeguard tells her that we didn't do anything and there's enough space. The lifeguard, also your child can't be in the adult pool. What? He is the best swimmer here. He can be wherever he wants. Then she didn't know what to do, so screamed in harassment. Ah, you're hitting me, manager. Then the nice bar employee comes. Turns out he is in charge of the pool area today. Yes, ma'am. Entitled parent, he hit me. Nice bar employee, me, my girlfriend, my two best friends. No, he didn't. Entitled parent. Liars, all of you will get to jail. The entitled parent, looking at us. Since you're rude to me, you'll give me your food and drinks for compensation. Me, yeah, in your dreams. Respect your elderly, young man, unbelievable. The bar employee already called the owner. Nice hotel owner, ma'am, I'll need you to leave now. They hit me and my child. Little kid, yes. No, I saw everything on the security cameras. I also saw that you two are not hotel guests, either paid at the gate, but slipped through. The entitled parent, now knowing that there were cameras, just left with her child. The nice hotel owner apologized and told the bar employee to give us another set of sandwiches for free. We swam for another 15 minutes, got out and ate all of our food. End of story? In a perfect world, yes. In this one, definitely not. After that, we went to change into casual clothing and got off the wet swimsuits. Took our belongings and left, saying thank you to the nice hotel owner and bar employee. As we were leaving and heading towards the parking lot, we called my mom to come and pick us up. We see the lady waiting to confront us. You stole my things and lied about everything. Give me my stuff now. She tries to get a hold of the bag I'm holding. Everyone's towels, swimming suits, and some other stuff. Literally everything we own. As a healthy, working out teen, I am stronger than she is and didn't let her get the bag. She started screaming in harassment, without noticing that the parking lot also has cameras. Don't hit me, I'm calling the police. Hotel owner, no you're not. I am doing it. For lying and harassment. Apparently, my girlfriend went to call the manager, without me noticing. Hotel owner, kids, go. I'll take care of her. We went to my mother, who was on the other end, and didn't hear anything. We got into the car, dropped us at my place to hang out for a bit, and my friends left a bit later. Completely by coincidence, my dad had an appointment with the owner that day, just a bit later, to discuss an upgrade in the fire alarm system, so he told my dad about everything. When he got home, he explained that the owner told him that after we left, he called the police and after ID and breathalyzer check, the woman was arrested for crime scene fleeing, drug distribution, being 0.10% drunk at a public place, and a lot more my father didn't bother to remember. We had a laugh. I told my friends and they also laughed for a few minutes. Goodbye. Story 4. So today, I was in a British supermarket, which is the British equivalent to the US Walmart. I was just standing in the queue to pay, listening to Reddit on YouTube. It was not a smart time for me to come in as there were a lot of people and it was hot. I had only gone in for a few things as I am in a lazy mood today and don't want to do anything that requires too much effort for dinner. So I'm standing there with my few things and an old man with a cane, who has only one item asks to go ahead of me. I have no issue with that, so off he goes and I go back to my phone, trying not to giggle too hard at Karens being Karens, unaware that a wild one is lurking behind me dumb duh. I get broken by Reddit's Karen voice saying bruh and start giggling. After a moment I feel someone gripping my arm. I'm pretty much turned around by this grabby arm flinging me about. Not easy by the way because I am not a little girl. I almost stumble over with the speed I'm turned around. This absolute beast of a woman, who looks like she's eaten me twice, starts screeching at me, so loudly I can hear her over the high volume of the audio. It went something like this. Who do you think you are listening to in our private conversation? Huh? I wasn't listening to your conversation. You obviously were. You started laughing when I told my husband a joke. Didn't your parents teach you manners? What is wrong with you, you stupid witch? I am completely bewildered by what is occurring, and just stand there not sure what to do as she rants at me. I am trying to keep an even face because the novelty of Reddit's Karen voice, being the reason I'm being verbally assaulted by a Karen, is not lost on me. Karen continued to rant and rave for about a minute, calling me different names. Then she says, "You should let us go ahead of you, you disrespectful girl. You let that old man go ahead of you. You should let us too since you've been so disrespectful. I have children I need to get back to." She and her husband have one basket each. I have literally 4 items in my basket. At this point, I've got my bearings and do have a nice shiny backbone. So I just smile at her politely and say, "If you don't keep your voice down, stop being entitled and back off, I will happily have the store call the police as you grabbing my arm and turning me like you did qualifies as assault. Now back off and leave me alone." I turned back around to wait for my turn. I do not see what is happening behind me, but when I told her off, Karen got a very shocked look on her face. Suddenly I hear a very loud, very angry voice sternly say, "Don't you dare touch her and you'll be dragged out of here in cuffs." I turn my head to the side to see a security guard marching towards us. I turn to see Karen holding an egg in one hand, pulled back preparing to throw it at me. Karen dropped the egg when the guard yelled at her. She actually looked scared to have this giant in a black jacket marching towards her. After a few minutes of arguing with security, he removes her husband, who is not entitled by the way, and looks like he wants the floor to swallow him whole, and I just go back to listening to Reddit, happily and loudly giggling away to his stories, excited that I finally have a story to tell from my first major Karen experience. Moral of the story: don't listen to Reddit in the supermarket. If he says Karen 3 times, one will appear and try to throw an egg at you. Story 5. So, a little backstory. I have a mild case of autism, which means I don't always pay enough attention and get easily distracted. My attention span is pretty short, and I tend to daydream a lot. Another thing to mention is that my parents are divorced, which, in hindsight, worked out best for them. My dad, the main subject of this story, has a personality you wouldn't really want in a parent when it comes to things like homework help. He would get frustrated if I didn't solve a problem after trying it repeatedly, even if it was past midnight. On the other hand, my mom provided me with tutors who were patient and calm, making learning a lot easier. My dad was strict, overbearingly so. I still remember how he used to force me to read SpongeBob SquarePants children's books and would get upset if I mispronounced words. I was just a kid. His reaction made me never want to pick up those books again, even though they were about a beloved cartoon character. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't abusive, but his strictness was overwhelming. As a child, I didn't understand what divorce really meant until someone explained it. At first, I thought it was great because I got 2 birthdays and 2 Christmas celebrations. But as I grew older, I started to fear my dad. I'd complain about going to his house, flinch when he called my name, and constantly ask what I had done wrong. This fear turned me into a bully toward my mom and sisters, lashing out and holding grudges. I regret those days deeply and wish I could go back in time to shake some sense into my younger self. When a child with autism or any mental condition turns 18, they sometimes have to decide which parent to live with for support in navigating adulthood. My autism is mild, so I was generally okay growing up, just a few tantrums here and there, but nothing too extreme. Every kid has their challenges, and we all grow past them eventually. A few months before the custody trial, a social worker visited both my parents' houses to observe our living situations. She noted that my mom provided a stable and healthy environment. At my dad's house, I shared openly about the stress I felt there, saying, "It's like trying to stop the countdown of a nuclear bomb." I couldn't believe my dad didn't intervene or scold me after she left. Later, another evaluator came to interview me about my preferences. I initially said I wanted to split my time between both parents, but I found out later that my dad had been eavesdropping on our conversation. That was unsettling, to say the least. At first, I was torn because I loved both my parents, but over time, I realized my dad wasn't capable of cooperating with my mom. He tried to manipulate situations to sway my decision, even pressuring me to invite friends over when I just wanted a quiet day to myself. I love my friends, but forcing them on me wasn't the answer. Now, onto the day of the trial. Because of my college schedule, the trial was set a week before my birthday. At the time, I was staying with my dad, so he drove me to the courthouse. On the way, he asked, "What do you want for your birthday?" I could tell he was trying to win me over, but I just replied, "I sent you a list," referencing the game-related wish list I'd emailed him. Once we arrived, I sat nervously on a bench near the courtroom door. My mom had never pressured me to choose her. She always reassured me, saying, "Just pick whichever house you want." That approach meant a lot to me. When the trial began, we were seated in the following order: my mom on the left, me in the middle, and my dad on the right. I barely paid attention to the earlier cases, as my mind was racing with thoughts about my own. Finally, it was our turn. My lawyer, appointed by the state, began presenting my case. My mom had been hesitant about sharing custody, and I didn't fully grasp her feelings until that day. Out of nowhere, I told my lawyer, "I've changed my mind. I want to live with my mom. Can I also speak to the judge privately?" The lawyer relayed my request to the judge, who agreed to a 5-minute recess before making a decision. During the break, the seating arrangement changed slightly, with an empty seat placed between me and my dad. I was shaking with anxiety, unable to look at him. During the break, my dad leaned over and whispered, "Do you want me to drop out? Just tell me what you want." His tone felt more like pressure than support. My mom stepped in, calmly saying, "You're scaring him. Leave him alone." My dad insisted he was just trying to understand my feelings, but it didn't feel that way to me. I excused myself to the restroom, where I tried to calm down. As I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection, I muttered, "What are you even doing?" Grovel 489. I called my older sister to vent, and she comforted me until the bathroom door suddenly swung open. It was my dad, barging in and saying, "They're ready for you." I quickly ended the call, but he wasn't done interrogating me. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. "Just a friend," I replied nervously. "Don't lie to me," he retorted. I stuck to my answer, not wanting to escalate things further. Back in the courtroom, I explained to the judge how things were at my dad's house. The judge handed me 2 candy bars as I spoke, and eventually, he announced his verdict. Custody would be granted to my mom. After the trial, my dad's demeanor changed. He acted as though nothing had happened, which, ironically, made me more uneasy. We had to stop by my community college for something, and my dad was adamant about accompanying me. My mom calmly stepped in, saying she would handle it. My dad stormed out of the courthouse, visibly upset, and drove off. My mom and I exited through the basement thankfully. The building had an alternate exit avoiding any further confrontation. Later, my dad called my mom, accusing her of brainwashing me. She hung up on him, unwilling to entertain his accusations. He followed up with a text calling her rude, using the Spanish term grosera, but she didn't respond. A few weeks later, I decided to visit my dad, hoping for some form of reconciliation. At first, things seemed fine. He was excited to see me, and we had a pleasant dinner of steak and rice. I even played some games on my Nintendo Switch. But then he came into my room and bluntly asked, "Why did you choose to live with your mom instead of me?" I felt cornered and tried to come up with an excuse, saying, "Because her house is closer to my college." It wasn't a great lie, and he didn't buy it. He pressed me for the truth, so I explained that his approach to helping me with homework was stressful and made me feel inadequate. I also mentioned how his need to micromanage finances made me uncomfortable. What I didn't realize at the time was that he was trying to pit me against my older sister. He told her I had shared personal details about her, which wasn't true. Understandably, she was furious and accused me of betraying her trust. I apologized profusely and explained how our dad was manipulating the situation. To make matters worse, I found out he had secretly recorded our conversations again. That discovery shattered any remaining trust I had in him. It became clear that my relationship with my dad would never be the same. Story 6. Hey, I know it's been a while since I've posted on this subreddit. It's a bit ironic because I created this account specifically to talk about my dad, the day of the trial, and even followed up with a post a year later. Now, I'm back with some big news. It's been 5 years since I cut ties with my dad because of his actions, which scared me and were filled with selfish accusations. But today, I come here with a sense of peace. I've finally made things right with him. For the past 5 years, I hated him. I did everything I could to remove him from my life, but the memories of everything he'd done stuck with me. My autism makes it difficult to forget things. I remember moments from when my older sister was 5 years old, things she has completely forgotten. It's not out of malice or irresponsibility on her part. She was just a little kid back then. Recently, I've been attending therapy and working on calming myself when these sudden memories flashes really take over my day. These memories are events where my older sister or my dad hurt me in some way. They made it hard to function, and I often felt overwhelmed. At one point, I started writing my thoughts in a notebook I bought, whether they were intrusive, upsetting, or even despairing. It was tough, but therapy helped me ground myself in the present and identify the moments that would trigger me. Gradually, I learned to calm myself when these flashes hit. I admit I was often angry with my older sister. I even tried to cut her off. Whenever we had a class together at college, I would get frustrated and convince myself that she was toxic. I saw her as someone who couldn't admit when she was wrong, fighting tooth and nail just to prove her point. At the end of 2024, I got upset with her for not paying back some money she owed me. This was a recurring issue. I would use it as a form of control. She came to confront me about it, and I just shut down, saying yes to whatever she said to get her to leave. Later, I angrily wrote in my journal about my frustration. But then, something changed. She came back, calmer this time, and asked if we could talk. She wanted to know what she could do to finally end the tension between us. Maybe it was the therapy helping me, but I saw this as an opportunity to heal. I told her that all I needed was an apology. I explained how my autism makes it hard for me to forgive and forget, even things that happened so long ago. To my surprise, she apologized. Her sincerity made my heart feel lighter, as if something inside me was finally mending. From that moment on, we were good. This was a turning point for me, but it also connected to my issues with my dad. Earlier this week, we were celebrating my older sister's birthday at a restaurant. During the gathering, I was, for lack of a better term, difficult. I left the dinner feeling bitter. I had spent years avoiding my dad, refusing to join family gatherings where he'd be present. I always came up with excuses to stay away. The anger I felt toward him festered for years. I wrote about it in my journal and vented to my therapist about everything he had done. When I returned home, my younger sister confronted me. She told me, as gently as possible, that I was being unfair and that our dad had been making genuine efforts to change over the years. Hearing this was hard because, to me, he was the source of so much pain and negativity in my life. Still, her words hit a nerve. I broke down, yelling at the top of my lungs and venting my anger. I slammed a metal rod, a leftover piece from an old curtain rod, onto my bed in frustration. My mom comforted me afterward, letting me cry it out, while my younger sister sat quietly, unsure of what to say. Despite my outburst, my sister decided to help. She suggested setting up what she called an apology appointment. She thought that if my dad could apologize to me, just as my older sister had, it might help me move forward. I reluctantly agreed, giving her 72 hours to arrange it. There wasn't really a time limit, she just had to head back to college soon. The next day, I felt a strange sense of sadness. I cried, wondering if I was clinging to my anger unnecessarily. My younger sister worked with my older sister to talk to our dad about fixing things between us. Finally, the day of our meeting arrived. My dad asked my sisters to leave the room so we could talk privately. Though they had promised to listen in case things went wrong, they respected his request. The conversation with my dad started in a way I never expected, calm and mature. I laid everything out, telling him how I felt over the years. I admitted that he scared me when I was younger. That revelation seemed to hit him the hardest. He explained that his intentions had always been to help me become a better person, especially with the challenges I faced because of my autism. But he hadn't realized that his methods, his anger and harshness had caused so much fear and pain. What surprised me most was when he shared a part of his own past. He told me he had experienced something similar with his own father. He'd harbored the same kind of resentment I felt toward him. Hearing that made me see him in a slightly different light. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me context, a glimpse into the cycle that had shaped him. Then, something I thought would never happen finally did. He apologized. He didn't try to justify his actions or make excuses. He simply said he was sorry for the pain he had caused me. And in that moment, the same feeling I'd had when my older sister apologized returned. It was as though something heavy in my heart finally lifted. For the first time in years, I felt like I could let go of the anger. I told him I might be willing to visit his house occasionally, something I had avoided for years. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start, a small step toward rebuilding our relationship. It's ironic, really. I created this account to vent about my dad and his actions during the day of the trial. Back then, all I felt was anger and bitterness. Now, I'm using the same account where I often post lighthearted content to share that I've finally found peace. I don't know if this is the right place to post something like this, but I wanted to share my journey. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I can live without hatred weighing me down. To end this post, I'd like to quote a video game. It might not be the most conventional way to wrap things up, but it resonates with me deeply. In every heart the seed of dark abides, the makings of a lord when watered well. With hate, sweet hate, she springs eternal, sings, all tempting draught, will drink of her again. But now I choose not to drink from that draught. I choose peace, healing, and moving forward. Thank you for reading my story.